Well, let's go down the mountain today and kind of see what it's like to live in the mountains above Los Angeles. We're about, I'd say 80 miles to the east of Los Angeles. And we're up in the mountains at about 6,000 feet elevation. We're gonna drop down the valley today and go visit Richard. It's Sunday morning. Richard's a real good guy. He taught me to fly when he was 85 years old. He was still instructing, and he's now 95. Still going well. He's a busy, smart man. Gotta make an appointment. He's got so many things going. Anyway, this is downtown Skyforest, California. There's not a lot of folks live up here. His population's like 300, which is amazing because you could throw a rock straight ahead of the way we're looking right now and hit 1 million people. Go. A lot of folks come up from LA to ride their motorcycles on these nice roads Sunday morning. He really needs to calm down, though. That is not cool. Other people up here, when they do stuff like that, it's really dangerous. This is not a racetrack or a closed course, folks. This is a nice mountain road, and we all come up here to relax and enjoy the beautiful weather and the beautiful scenery. I live up here, and I moved up here because I like the beautiful weather and scenery. I have to do a bit of driving. It's a half an hour down the mountain, down into the valley. That's where the work is. There's not a lot of work up here. You could work at one of the restaurants or a little sky park up here, but that's not gonna finance my lifestyle. This is Sky Park. Used to be Santa's Village when I was a kid. It was a little amusement park for kids, and they still kind of got a little Santa Village in it. But they've rebuilt it to cater towards mountain bikers and people who want to do outdoor activities. They're building off to the right a trailer park, or what do they call that? A camping RV park. There we go. And that'll be really nice when it's done. They're doing it. They seem to have a ton of money to do it. They've clearly spent a fortune on the place. It had been closed for about 10 years. The guy who built it, his name was Putty Hank. What an interesting name. And he died, I'm going to say 15 years ago, and then the place was closed for 10 years after that. But not a tremendous amount of industry up here. This is mostly national forest. There are deer, and bear, and bobcat, mountain lion, possums, skunks, raccoons. Even in the higher mountains up here, there's some mountains that are in the 11,000 foot range. The highest one's 11,500. It's like 498 or something like that. But anyway, 11,500. And there's some bighorn sheep on those mountains. It's all part of this ridge. The ridge we're on here is, it runs between 5,000 and 6,000 feet. We are going to drive over to a little area called Running Springs. It's a little community, and there's a canyon that goes down. It's basically called the City Creek Canyon. It goes down into the valley. It was one of the original roads up into the mountains. There was really three. There was Waterman Canyon, City Creek Canyon, and then on the other side, Mill Creek. And that goes up to the back of Big Bear. This one drops up out of Big Bear down to Running Springs and into the valley. And then Waterman Canyon goes into San Bernardino. That's 20 miles behind us. It was originally, Waterman Canyon was named after some guy named Waterman. That was his last name, and he had a silver mine at the top of that canyon. The road we're going to go down follows City Creek, and I met a guy back in the 1980s who was in his 80s then. He was in his late 80s then. Actually, he was, yeah, that would have been about right, because he was just about year for year for the that 100 years. I mean, I think he was born in like 1899, or yeah, I think he was born in 1899. I remember he lived to be 101 years old. Passed away a good 20 years ago. And his name was Luther Holden. But anyway, one of the jobs he had as a teenager was to drive cars up this canyon that we're going to go down. And he said it would take 5 days to get up to Big Bear Lake in these old cars. You know, there was just a trail. In fact, the road we're going down wasn't really put in until the 1950s. Up to that point, it was a one-lane road where when you met another car, you had to pull over and let them by. And in Luther Holden's day, it was just a trail. And he said when they crossed the river, oftentimes they would have to move rocks and boulders and make a trail or a path or a crossing. So they would come up in a convoy of cars. He drove, he told me it was a big old-fashioned, one of the first Buicks that he drove. They actually, down in Redlands, which is down at the base of this mountain, probably 35 miles from where we're at now, they have one of the oldest Buick dealerships in the nation. It started in 1906. I do love the history around here. Big Bear is about 15 miles on down this road from where we're at. And the city of Redlands built Big Bear Dam to provide water. It's a pretty arid valley down there. Pretty hot. We're at 67 degrees. I'm sure it's already 87 degrees down there, and it'll be 100. It'll get up to about 70 here, but it'll be 100 down there. So we're going to kind of just take a shortcut and get over to the road that heads down into the valley. This is kind of just a little shortcut. My big old truck doesn't make that turn very well. This little area right here where they've got the houses built is called the Enchanted Forest. That's what people call it. It has a great view. These houses just hang off of this cliff here. And there's several little areas that have houses in them, but like I say, this is mostly national forest, and I don't know what the development rules were or anything, but most of these areas were purchased and subdivided before this was national forest. Like Arrowhead Lake was, Big Bear was, they were all done at the turn of the last century, you know, from 1800 to 1900s. The areas of this were bought up and subdivided, and this was so remote back then that a lot of this stuff never got built up until the 60s and 70s, which is the 1960s and 70s, which pretty much is what is in this area. You can't buy raw, well, there is some raw property available, but you can't build on it anymore. First of all, there's no water available. All the water rights have been claimed, and I mean, if there's a drop of water, it gets bought by somebody and shipped off to some development in LA. Santa Ana River that goes, it ends up down, it goes into the water kind of just north of Huntington Beach. I mean, it goes into the ocean down there. It starts right up here. It starts about 15 miles from here in this mountain range. A place called Forest Falls is the headwater, and you can actually see the water springing out of the rocks. I mean, it just bubbles up out of the earth, and it creates the Santa Ana River. It goes all the way through Riverside in Orange County down to the beach. You can see off in the distance would be the beach. The mountain range we look over there that you got that was pretty prominent above the clouds is called Saddleback, and that's between Riverside and Orange County. And then Orange County's on the other side of that, and then the beach is just beyond it. As the bird flies, probably about 80 miles to the ocean. If you were to drive it on a Sunday morning, you could get there probably from here an hour and 20 minutes. It's not bad. So this is where you can go skiing in the wintertime here. And they always say you can surf in the morning and ski in the afternoon in Southern California. Well, this is where you'd be skiing. In the winter, this area would be all covered with snow. There would be, in the higher altitudes, you can get a lot of snow. We're right around where we're at. There's usually a foot of snow on the ground or so all winter long. That's for usually February and March. Usually doesn't snow until late January. Sometimes, you can get it earlier, and other times be very little snow at all year long. Last year, or this year I should say, geez, we had a ton of snow. It snowed for all of February, almost every day, and it snowed in March, and it snowed in April, and then, so there was a ton of snow. And right here is the 2-lane highway that goes up to the mountains. We took a shortcut, and this is basically the path that the old pioneers in this area would have come up. And this would have been, in the 1950s, this was a 1-lane road. They put this highway in right after World War II. A lot of traffic today because people are going to be, Sunday they're going to be leaving. They were up here for the weekend, and this road is always busy on the weekend. We got somebody hot rod coming up here. I'm just going to let them pass me. Come on, buddy. Well, I slowed down for you, and you were polite too, so we've got a bunch of nice folks today. So from my house to the bottom of the mountain in the valley is about 28 minutes on average, down to the Highland city limits, and that's a town down there. You go from 6,000 feet down to about 1,400 feet in elevation. And if you were to drive to the ocean, that would slowly flatten out into zero. So we're heading down to a town called Highland, and then I'm going to drive on over to Hemet. But this is a nice drive. I don't mind it. People tend to be pretty polite on the weekends. The commuters that go up and down this hill for work, they tend to drive like nuts, and they're in a huge hurry, and they just need to relax. You live in the mountains because it's beautiful. It's pleasant. I mean, look at the scenery. We're looking out. That mountain in front of us is Saddleback Mountain. Like I said, that's between Riverside, it's on this side of the mountain, and Orange County's on the other. On a clear day, you can see all the way out to Catalina when you're coming down here, which is about 125, 130 miles from here. This is a very steep mountain as far as mountains go. Just on the other side of the Banning Pass, which goes out to Palm Springs, that is the steepest mountain in the world. But to give you an idea how steep this is, we're going to lose 4,500 feet of elevation as we go down this mountain, and if we just went straight down this, if we were bird flying down this, that would be less than a mile horizontally. So it's really a very, very steep mountain. This mountain range is created by the Pacific tectonic plate hitting the North American tectonic plate, and this is a crumple zone where all of these mountains are caused by the Earth colliding, the two tectonic plates colliding together. That mountain straight out there in the distance, the tall one, is called Mount San Jacinto, and that is the steepest mountain in the world. It's like a 11,000 foot peak, but in basically a half a mile, you go from desert, Palm Springs desert, and I mean it's desert, to alpine forest at the top. And as we're going down, you can kind of see we're starting to lose the pine trees now, and we're going to go into some deciduous trees, and then we're going to drop down into a pretty arid climate. It's an amazing place to live. It's really pleasant. And as far as drives go in the Los Angeles area, if I have to drive a half an hour to get down to the valley, a lot of my work is down in Riverside County, so I might drive 45 minutes to an hour to get down to work. I have a couple different, definitely a person who has his fingers in a lot of pies. So when I'm working in the construction industry, I tend to go down to Riverside County. Hey, by the way, underneath all these clouds is the greater Los Angeles, Orange County, Riverside area. And there's a good, under those clouds, there's a good 12 million people living down there. And then if you go from Los Angeles all the way down to San Diego, which is definitely within reach, I think it's close to 18 million people now total. It's still a big area, though. I mean, it's not like they're all LA. This is the suburbs of LA. We're looking out at where I'm going, is out off in that direction today. Anyway, you can see they cut this road, and it used to just hang off, the road used to just hang off the side of the cliffs here. You can see there are areas where I could pull off and we could walk out and we could see old bridges and old cobblestone paths that have been built up where they used to come up this mountain, but not anymore. They're just, they're off to the side. You got to hike off to get them. I've done it over the years. But it's a pleasant, interesting drive. I've made this drive probably over 1,000 times in my life, and I always enjoy it. I always enjoy it. I get to think a little bit as I'm coming down. It's nice scenery. You'll occasionally see a deer run across, or a bobcat. You see bobcats every once in a while run across. Really beautiful, powerful animals too. They just look like they could rip something apart. Right there off to the right, that's where you would see the Pacific Ocean. I mean, that's a clear shot to the Pacific Ocean. You're basically looking out towards Long Beach, California, as you do that. Clear evenings, man, you'll just see all of the lights of all of humanity that's in Southern California, and then you'll just see this dark spot, which is the Pacific Ocean. It's really beautiful, really beautiful. This little crumply area out in front of us is called the Badlands, and it's all part of that plate tectonics hitting, and that area is so unstable that it's not built up. There's no houses on it, which is really rare for Southern California. at least this area of Southern California. I mean, you don't have to go very far to get out to the desert, and but you could get lost up in these mountains. People get lost every year. And occasionally they find them in a canyon, and it's a bunch of bones and shredded shirts. But I used to volunteer for the local search and rescue and the local rangers, and we can typically find them. We know where they go. It's you learn over time where people go. Typically what happens is they get off the trail and they try to cut through one of these canyons or down these chutes, and they just get lost. And there's a lot more wilderness here than you would ever imagine, and it's deceptive because you can look down in the valley and see Los Angeles, but there's thousands of square miles up in this national forest. In fact, when I was volunteer rangering, I came across an illegal pot farm once, and there's water in these mountains, and so what they'll do is they'll take a bunch of hose and they'll drag it over to a little relatively flat spot and water their pot. So, and the one I came across was about an acre, really small. Up in Northern California, they have huge ones out there. You can't, I mean, that's dangerous business because those boys are serious, and it's a shame. I was up near, where was it, Orville, California. Went up there to buy a old Isuzu Trooper I was using for parts for the Trooper that I'm building. At the end of the road where I was, there was definitely a guy walking around with a gun protecting his pot farm. And I talked to the fellow who lived there. He goes, yeah, because they see a car they don't recognize, they get a little uptight. But now that he saw that I came into his driveway, he goes, it'll be all right. But that's freaky, and that's really not cool. Also, people can get high. Oh well, whatever. So we're out of the pine now, and we're down into the oak trees, and it's kind of scrub oak. These aren't real. But you go up north, they had a lot more water. They'd be well-developed trees, but these green clumps are oaks on the side of the road. So we're out of the conifers and into the deciduous. This is really native California. This is what California would have looked like when the pioneers came in here. A little bit of this brown grass on the side of the road that you're seeing, that's not native. That came back in the gold rush days on cattle from like China, and it dries up every year. It doesn't stay green. It's one of the reasons we have the big fires. That stuff burns like crazy. But the stuff that's green that you see is all native. This is definitely what they would have seen. Okay, we were at 6,000. We're down to 3,000 feet elevation now. We're dropping right on down the mountain. City Creek is actually off to our left. We're going to cross it a couple times here in a few miles, but we've been coming down following it, and its headwaters were right about where we turned onto the highway here after the little shortcut. And the creek just bubbles out of the side of the mountains. It's some kind of aquifer that's leaking out of the side of the mountains. All of this water, by the way, just gets sucked up and put into a reservoir or a tank, or a lot of times they pump it down into the ground table and then pump it out when they need it. Out here on the outskirts of LA, it's pretty dry. Los Angeles is a dry place too, but it's a bit cooler than it is out in this area because they have the ocean influence, and we're just at the end of the ocean influence here. If it's 80 in Los Angeles, it could be 90 out here. When I say out here, I mean at the bottom of the mountain, not in the mountain. This stays relatively cool. It's very pleasant all year long. In fact, I have forced heating in my house, but I don't have an air conditioner. No need for it. I have never felt need for it. It actually was cold last night. It's the middle of August. Had to use blankets on the bed. That's how cold it gets. So doing a little bit of road work there, repairing this bridge over here, and this is one of the bridges that goes over City Creek. I don't know what they're doing to it. I can't tell. It doesn't look like they're widening it. It just looks like they're repairing the guardrail. Probably some inspection indicated that it needed some work. It usually gets caused by exposed rebar. And so the road gets turned into a little one-lane road here. They've been working on it a couple months. I guess they're going to be working on it into September, so another 5 weeks or so. If you can see the mountains up above us, that's exactly where we came from. There's some towers up there. That's just a few miles away from my home. When you look out in front, that's all national forest, and nobody goes in there. And you can get there's some old trails in there that I explored 25 years ago, and they've got to be overgrown by now. They were old then. I mean, a lot of the stuff in the national forest, it's kind of jerky. You know, they used to take care of all of that stuff back in the 1950s. They had rangers, and now the rangers have just turned into cops. They carry guns. They drive around in their SUVs, and frankly, they don't do shit but try to hassle people for tickets, you know, because nowadays you have to pay to park up in the forest, which is, you have to have what they call an adventure pass. What a nice thing to say. Should be an extortion pass. You know, we've already paid for this national forest 100 years ago. It's not costing the government anything. It's actually making money. But if you go into it, they want to charge you, and the rangers walk around with guns acting like cops and demanding everybody pay them, and they issue tickets, and it's seriously not cool. Some of the really old-time rangers are pretty cool, the kind of old hippie guys from the 1960s who went out and, you know, just wanted to be with nature and be friendly and love one another. Those guys are pretty cool, but the new ones are just cops, and they don't do anything to take care of the forest. So what I'm getting at is they don't do any trail maintenance or anything like that. They don't do any education like they used to, and, you know, they don't greet people and tell them, you know, to beware of rattlesnakes. They just want to write tickets and make people run. And I guess that's the way the country's going. Everybody wants to make everybody wrong. So we're crossing the creek again. This bridge is easily 200 feet in the air. It's a pretty steep canyon. There's an old bridge just to our left down below. It's 100 feet in the air. And we used to go rappelling off of that when we were kids. It was fun. And up above us there, up high, you can see a little bit of the old road. There's a bunch of places that you're not going to be able to see from the camera, but where you can see it's cut into, it was really just cut into the side of this canyon. This canyon's extremely steep. And off to our left, you know, there's water running. It runs all year long, which is unusual in Southern California. A lot of water dries up. This is pretty prolific when it comes to spilling water. A lot of history in this area. A little bit to the east of where we're at. We're heading due south right now. A little bit to the east of where we're at. There was some gold mining going on back in the day. A little bit to the west too. There's another canyon about 30 miles from here called the East Fork Canyon, and people still do gold mining in there. It's pretty productive. A lot of local Indian history here. These Indians were basically in the valley that we're going down to all the way out to Palm Springs. Let's see, the first meaning this was a Spanish land grant. So the first European were from Spain. The first Europeans, Spanish, and this land grant in this area, there was a bunch of them. But in this area, and when I say land grants, they're the size of counties. They're huge, huge swaths of Southern California that were run by families. And the family that ran the one in this area was called the Lugo family, and they were here by they were here in the 1700s. And the next wave of European white settlers, if you will, that came in this area, the Mormons came into this area in the 1850s, and they bought a lot of the land from the Spanish that were still here, and a lot of the Spanish that were here got displaced when California had what they called the Bear Flag Revolt. And it was like 1848. And some of the Spanish managed to hang on to some of their land, but mostly it just got taken from them. And I don't know how you justify that. Definitely. And our government didn't do it. It's just the settlers rose up on their own and just kind of took over and ran out. And the Spanish didn't have a lot of soldiers in the area, and so they just pushed them out. And so the Lugo family, there's still a lot of Lugos in the phone book here in this area, but we're looking down at their land grant right now. It's a little bit hazy today. That's a little bit hazy. It was a little overcast. It felt there was moisture in the air, and kind of felt like might even get a rain shower in the mountains, but we didn't. So that's the trip down from basically Lake Arrowhead. Skyforest is the little community that I live in, and now we're down to Highland, California, and we are in Southern California now. This is greater Los Angeles area. We're at the outskirts of it. Downtown is off to our right. See that 210 is going to take you into Pasadena. Pasadena is right up against Los Angeles, and we're going to go east, and so we're heading out towards Palm Springs. And it is a great place to live. I can't imagine a better place to live. This is a wonderful part of the world.